I'm going to say a couple of words before we have some discussion. Please have a seat. Before we have a little bit of a discussion, and then I'd like to have a more open discussion. There's a mic back here that does work, and so we'll have an opportunity to take questions from people here. My name is Erica Schlager. I work as counsel for international law at the Helsinki Commission. I want to say how very pleased I am that we were able to have this film screening here. I am very grateful that we have Kostel Berkus, who has come from Europe, where he is chair of the Roma Education Fund. Very grateful that he has come here to be with us and speak about these important issues. We also have Sherban Ravenel from the Romanian Embassy with us to share with us any comments he'd like after Kostel speaks. And I would add that Sherban and the Romanian Embassy have been great friends to the Helsinki Commission, not only as interlocutors on issues relating to the Roma minority, but also on a range of issues in the OSCE region, and we very much appreciate that friendship. And then, of course, Mona Niquara, our fabulous director and producer, who has brought us this film, which puts a spotlight on these issues. I also want to mention just a couple other people that are here with us. Adnan Karamejevic from the Open Society Institute and OSI, of course, has a very long-standing engagement on Romani issues and helped facilitate, not only for this event, but some other events we've had, Roma speakers from Europe to come over. We're very pleased to have Christina Grigore here. If you look at the materials we had up front, I did include the New York Times editorial that she wrote last fall. So thank you for joining us today. Dan Nadel and Aaron Spitzer from the Department of State in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor. Assistant Secretary Posner, who is in Europe right now, is a member of the Helsinki Commission, and his office has been extremely supportive of the work on Roma and human rights issues. So thank you for being here and the work that you all are doing on those issues. And Catherine Payich, from NDI, National Democratic Institute, which has done some very important initiatives focusing on Romani political participation. So thank you all and everyone for being here today. I did want to mention one other handout that's out front. It's a copy of a resolution adopted by the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in 2002, so that's almost a decade ago. And it's a resolution that was introduced by the chairman of the Helsinki Commission, Congressman Christopher Smith. And it's specifically on the subject of Roma education. And I think it shows a couple of things. One, this is not a new subject. It's a subject we've been talking about for a while now. That resolution talks about desegregation issues, it talks about the importance of early childhood education, and it talks about adult education issues. And I'm sorry to say that we haven't seen more progress in the last 10 years. If you look at the materials from the European Roma Rights Center, you can see we've had a number of cases now go to the European Court on Human Rights, but there's still a lot more work to do. Now I'm going to ask Kostel to make comments about this general subject, drawing on the breadth and depth of experience that he has working on Roma education issues, and then ask our other colleagues to speak before turning it over. But I guess if there's one last observation I'd make before turning it over to Kostel, is that this film is set in Romania, and it's about Roma education issues. But there's really something very universal in what's portrayed here. As a parent of two children, I think that there's nothing, that I have seen in Washington politics that can hold a candle to the bare-knuckle street fighting of a parent-teacher meeting. Parents everywhere want their kids to have a good education. And so the cases described in the European Roma Rights Center materials come from the Czech Republic, they come from Greece, they come from Croatia, and any day of the week that you open newspapers in the United States, you'll see stories about how people are struggling or fighting over education issues here. So we do want to focus on specific challenges that relate to Romani minorities, but I think the desire for people to have a good education for their children and to give them a better future than they know themselves is really speaks to something universal in parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Erika. Just before presenting a few numbers about the education of the situation of Roma in Europe and some indicators about the education in some countries, I would like to thank Mona for the great work that she has done in putting all these images and the work over the years to show just a small piece of reality. And I think the story that we just seen is actually the story of many others, hundreds or thousands of children that are living in different countries in Europe. Now, I know how many of you are familiar with the situation of Roma in Europe. I'm coming from Romania myself, and I'm the chairperson of the Roma Education Fund, which is a foundation established by the World Bank and Open Society Institute in 2005 to address specifically the education needs that Roma children are needed and to overcome the education gaps that do exist between Roma children and the rest of the children in the majority society. The foundation works throughout decades from 2005, and we hope that we will work beyond 2015. We are doing, we offer support for projects and programs at all educational levels, including from the very early stage, early childhood development, primary, secondary and tertiary education. And since the establishment, we already have spent about 20 million euro in supporting this intervention, mainly to ensure an inclusive education, meaning that we do support a lot of desegregation programs. You might ask me later how that goes in some countries. But just a few numbers about the Roma minority in Europe. About 10 million of people are living in different countries, in Central, Eastern, Southeastern European countries. Maybe I will name a few of them. Bulgaria, 750,000 people, which is about 10% of the population. Czech Republic, close to 200,000 people. Of course, these are estimates number, and maybe I should just mention that there is quite a big difference between the official data from the official census and the estimates due to the number of reasons why Roma do not assume the ethnic identity. Hungary, about close to 600,000, which is 6% of the population. Romania, the picture that we just saw, is the country with the largest number of Roma population, is close to 2 million people, about close to 7%. The entire population, the size of the Romanian population is 23 million people. Macedonia, 240,000 people, which is 12%. Serbia, 400,000. Slovakia, 500,000. So the estimates of Roma population in most of the European countries are close to 10 million people. Now, some indicators about the education and the situation of Roma children from the education point of view. For example, high share of never enrolled children in the system. In Bulgaria, children who do not enroll in any kind of education, it's about 15%. So they are totally left out of the school. The same data are similar with the Romanian situation. 25% in Serbia, 25% of the children, Roma children, never enrolled in any form of education. Participation in preschool, again, under 7% of Roma children participate in the preschool education in Serbia, compared with 20% in Romania, and less than 20% in Hungary, and about 35% in Bulgaria. So only 35% children age population of Roma children in population attend kind of form of preschool education. Transition from primary to secondary education. In Hungary, only 20% of Roma children are going to secondary education. And some of those are finishing or graduating secondary education. And very low number of them are finishing higher education. Completion rate, maybe I will give you some data about the segregation because this was the subject of our film. In Bulgaria, between 44 to 70% of Roma children are learning in segregated schools, and 51 of pupils in special education system are of Roma origin. So this is only in Bulgaria. In Hungary, up to 25% of Roma in segregated primary school, and in catch-up classes, remedial classes, over 70% of the children who are in this catch-up classes are of Roma origin. In Romania, between 20 to 45% of Roma children are studying in a segregated environment, either schools or classes or spatial education, as it was reflected in the film. In Slovakia, over 60% of children that are studying in schools for children with mental disabilities are of Roma origin. So there is an overrepresentation of Roma children placed wrongly by assessment, which are mainly done by the psychologists or by teachers in class, are wrongly placed in schools for children with mental disabilities. Serbia, we are on the way to collect data. So these are just few information about the magnitude of the phenomenon that do exist in most of the European countries. And I'm very aware that a number of initiatives have been taken over the past years, but not very much progress has been done. As we saw in the film, over the years, tuition and the children was ending up in being sent to the schools for children with disabilities, which from our view, this is the most aggressive form of discrimination, and this is the most, so to say, I've been visiting a number of schools in Romania, and some of those were supported with the pre-accession funds during the time that Romania tried to catch up with the political condition and to improve the situation economically, socially. And Roma was within the political agenda one of the priorities. Some money was allocated by the European Union, visiting maybe hundreds of schools during that period. And the movie was rightly reflect the situation. There was so much investment in the structure, in the infrastructure of the schools, and very less in the quality, very less in working with the teachers. You notice the difference between the two teachers, and you notice how that first behave and operate with the same mentality that at the end reflects the overwhelming mentality of the Romanians. How do they behave, how do they think about the gypsies? Yeah? And very small minority of teachers that are actually looking not to the color or to the ethnicity of the children, but looking to them as human beings and trying to give help. Unfortunately, this is again, it's a very small minority, but we have to keep our optimism that we working with teachers, we can, in this way, we can help more and more children. In 2003, and Mona is very aware about that case too, when we start monitoring the segregation in Romania and trying to build cases for court and taking the schools and taking the Ministry of Education to court, there was one case that was the first case that we take to the court, and it was a decision that this is a discrimination and this is one of the abuse that the state are doing against children, and as a matter of fact, the school has to ensure inclusion and make sure that all children have access to the same quality and the same school facilities, no matter what ethnical or religious background. And I remember during the interviews with the parents and with the children, one children actually was saying what Arlene or Barry was saying. Everything that we wanted, nothing else than being together with the other kids. Being in the same room, having the better facilities, and playing with the other kids. So it's not a big wish. It shouldn't be. But actually, in reality, it is very difficult to achieve. Because I was asking him, if you were Minister of Education, what actually you would ask for him? Do you have any wish? And he was saying nothing. I just want to have a better table, school table, the room to be warmer, because during the winter there was placed in a different class without windows and it was really cold. And everything that I want is to be with the others, and nothing else. This is my wish. So that makes me actually very motivated to do something for overcoming the situation. And I can tell you from the positive side, because we are maybe in 2011, and there are progress since 2003 until today. Ministry of Education has taken a number of steps to improve legislation and to make clear to each schools and county inspectorate that the segregation is forbidden. So we are not lacking legislation, we are not lacking political will. What we are lacking, and you notice in the movie, is actually the public support. Is the school principals who do not show any support of making sure that all kids are treated equally. First of all, teachers' community is another critical factor in bringing this change. Mayor, it's again, I will say, the one that should lead and make sure that the schools are open to everyone. And the last but not least, the community, the non-Roma community. So these are the important actors to translate the existing legislation into practice, because this is what we are lacking. After so many years, I remember in 2003, the government, even they don't want to accept that we are facing this problem. They don't want to accept the reality. They deny it. So this is the first phase. The second phase is that they acknowledge, yes, indeed, sorry, we have a problem. Let's not longer hide that we have a problem. Third phase is that, okay, what shall we do? And they elaborate legal norms. They elaborate paper, they elaborate ministerial order, they organize a conference, they organize training with the school inspectorate. But from this moment till that we actually go back to Benny's or Aline's stories, it's made a huge distance. Because the critical actors are again those that I already mentioned. Parents, school principals, mayor, and the community, the rest of the community, the majority community. So our foundation is trying, we are working quite intensely in the area. Unfortunately, the process lies on the initiative of civil society, so there is not yet governmental force to engage the institution in this process. After 10 years, Romania, I described already. Slovakia, from my view, maybe I have more information, for my view is the worst case. And then Czech Republic is the situation where we have a decision of the European Human Rights Court condemning and sanctioning what the Czech government is doing. And after 2 years of this decision, the Czech government hasn't done anything to implement this decision, which is actually undermining the rule of law, undermining the obligation that the Czech government has towards the international laws. Because what we're talking about the gypsies. How shall the Czech government respect the law when we're talking about the second-class citizens? Or are the gypsies the citizens of our country? So these are maybe dilemmas that the Czech politician has to face by taking steps to fulfill and comply with the international obligation and with the international laws, because that was a violation of children's rights. And I think equally the education public system again. So just I want to go further, I can continue speaking about the problems in other countries as well. But I think Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Slovakia has very similar, has the most similarities when it comes to how they treat children. First, how they treat Roma children. So if we take out the ethnicity, it's about that no matter who these children are, no matter who religions they have, state has to ensure that all children has access in the same manner, in the same quality, the same facilities as all the others. So actually, it's the state, these are the state actors. I'm not trying to blame that it's whatever prime minister or the minister of education, because the complexity of this problem are based on different stakeholders. Who is the one managing the schools? Who is the one managing the community? What is the reason? Why? It was one of the questions of the old man, the parents. He doesn't know why it's like this. So we know, we have some answer, and we know why it's happening. Because most of the majority of population, for example, in Romania, more than 70% of this was the data from opinion polls. They don't want to have anything to do with the gypsies. They have to have them as neighbors. So this shows how tolerant or intolerant the mainstream society are towards the Roma people in European countries. So I will stop here by giving you the speaker a chance to then we'll get some questions.
Thank you so much. And Siobhan, did you want to add some comments or observations?
Just a couple of very brief ones. Thank you so much, Mona, for putting this movie together. Perhaps like some of you, I was very happy that the lights went off and I was able to sit cheerfully in my corner from time to time at some of the more candid scenes. Costel has made some excellent points, and I only wanted to re-emphasize some of them and sort of make a couple of other comments. I think one of the things that this movie greatly shows us is the fact that it's not always enough to have a legislative framework, and it's not always enough to have the commitment of the central government to do this and to implement this decision and to work on this. And it's not always enough to have the appropriate central programs and the funding that are directed towards implementing, such solutions. It always sort of trickles down to the local level. And as you said, to the school director and to the teachers and to the willingness of the teachers to commit to what they are there for, to teach the children no matter what their ethnicity and level of knowledge is. And I think in the movie, one of the scenes that made the most impact on me was how two different teachers addressing the same group of children with the same intellectual capacity and the same knowledge and so on obtained different results. So basically, the end of the analysis is down to the individuals and how they are able to work on these issues at ground level. Because it's, the political commitment is there and so on, but you got to have, the people there who can actually do these things. And I think this is something that I really liked in the movie, the way it's shown. Another comment I would make was how the movie has shown us that discrimination is not something that you're born with. It's something that is societal and it's community-based, and you learn it from the people that you live with. So we have Boga, who is 7 or 8 years old. He has no discrimination towards the Roma children because he's at a young age where he he has not lived sufficient in the society to learn them. So I think that one of the things that we should be doing, and the Romanian government is doing, is sort of intensify programs that are aimed to fight discrimination. And this obviously goes from, bodies such as the National Council for Combating Discrimination that we have and that tackle cases of discrimination at national level, to write down projects on, at local levels that aim to fight this. And I think another point that I would make is Costel was very keen and very right to emphasize the fact that training is necessary for teachers. And we had several programs in the last couple of years, including a program that had school mediators trained working in schools to facilitate integration of Roma children and working with the Roma and non-Roma communities to do that. But all is, you want to have people as trained as possible to be able to do the right things in their place of work and so on. So finally, I would say that the movie has also shown us that there is this very intrinsic relationship between the economic condition of the Roma communities and their level of education, and that these are sort of linked both ways, as I see it from the movie, especially at a point where some of the Roma children can't complete their homework because of the economic condition that they live in. And on the other hand, you think about the fact that if they don't do their homework and they don't continue their education, this is going to affect their economic situation in the future. So I think that the way that these two elements are interlinked is something that is really something we need to work on as well. So I think these would just be a couple of points that I wanted to make, and I'll let Mona take over.
If I could just, before Mona starts, just to note, we do have a microphone back here. After Mona has made a few comments, I would invite anyone who has questions to ask them from the microphone and identify yourself. And I already have a couple of questions, so if I don't see anyone at the mic when Mona's done, I'll start with my own. Thank you.
I'll try to be brief and just give you a little bit of background of where this film came from and how it came about. My own background is also as a human rights activist. Costel indicated that a little bit. In a way, we started working on the issue of Roma education around the same time, and sort of grew up and educated ourselves about the issue around the same time. And as we continue to work on the issue of Roma education, we realize that working with principles and working with statements of principle is certainly insufficient. It's one thing to work on the big picture, and it's another thing to actually understand what these principles look like in practice. I am myself a parent of 2 kids, so I became gradually interested in finding out what exactly segregation means for those kids most affected by it, and what exactly integration means for all of the kids affected by it, because this is not an issue that affects only Roma kids, it also affects my kids, majority kids. The absence of integration means actually that we are poor culturally, emotionally, that our kids grow without actually knowing how to deal with difference, without actually having friends that are different from them that can enrich their lives. So, because I had some prior experience working in film, I kind of, and I found out that there is this batch of schools that were going to be integrated in my own home country, Romania, starting in 2005. I decided to just take a camera and see, almost as an experiment, this thing called integration looks like up close. We started filming in, I think it was May 2006. We thought we were going to film a story of success. We did not know what the film was going to turn out. Like, we also thought we were going to film only for 1 year. It turned into 4. And what we found was eventually sort of a primer, unfortunately. It was a primer to the different kinds of discrimination and segregation that children experience in school. You have basically the whole range from separate classes, separate buildings, being set up in the last row and ignored by teachers, being sent to a special school for children with disabilities. It was shocking and it was very disheartening to witness this in a very personal manner over a period of 4 years. And to feel like you're sitting there with a camera as time passes for these children. And as an entire generation squanders the opportunity of using the tremendous social capital and a tremendous cultural capital to its own advantage. I do not know actually how representative statistically what we found is, but I know that it's, as a Romanian and as an activist, I know that it's symptomatic. And that is more saddening actually than statistics. And it's symptomatic precisely of cultural issues. There are no barriers to actually finding political and large picture solutions eventually, but there's a lack of know-how at the local level. There's a lot of know-how about how to distribute and monitor resources when it comes to education for Roma. And there is a lack of understanding about how to change our own cultures to actually make lasting change possible. I'll stop here. Question, please?
Sorry. Good afternoon. My name is Allison Hillman. I'm with the Open Society Foundation's Disability Rights Initiative. And it's striking to me how everything that all three of you have said, children want to be included, children want to have quality education, quality teachers, quality classrooms. You could take out Roma children or minority children and insert children with disabilities. And it's striking to me how you talk about inclusive education, but then seem not to include children with disabilities. At least that's how I've heard what you were saying. So that's just a comment to start with. And then wondering, with the Disability Rights Initiative and our colleagues at the Justice Initiative who've been very involved in this work, we've been working with them to finesse some of the advocacy language that they've used recently so that have do no harm, so that advocacy around Roma rights doesn't mean that, oh, they're segregated in second-class schools with those children with disabilities, So that's one thing, and I guess it strikes me that if there were no schools for children with disabilities, we wouldn't have to be talking about having children or minorities being segregated into second-class schools. So, and now a question after that. Just wondering if the Roma Education Fund and the Helsinki Commission are interested in or are actively building bridges to the disability rights community to be able to work on this issue in a coalition and really get at segregated schools, and that everyone has a right to be included in education, including children with disabilities. And just to comment quickly on Servan's point that teachers are being taught to include everyone. and to include Roma children and teach to Roma children. I mean, that's what we say from the disability rights movement as well. Teachers need to be trained to teach to the range of human experience. And we all benefit when people are included. So I'll just stop there.
Maybe I will start with answering to your comments. That there is, we have to be very correct and honest to when we advocate for an issue. First, we have to have the understanding that those children are not mentally disabled. It's not to harm anybody. It's not to say that we are thinking about children with disabilities as being the second-class children. The situation in Slovakia that these children are placed in schools where they shouldn't be placed. There is assessments, there are assessments made by psychologists wrongly in order to find a way out of these children to be placed in schools for children with mental disabilities. So there are so many situations that people wanted to confuse. And this is not, it's so to say, from my point of view, it's undermining the role. It's actually, how to explain to you, at least from my view, teachers, some teachers, the schools that I visited, they tell to me that these children, they don't have any problem, but because they are coming from families which is not good families, they are placed in schools for children with mental disabilities. And they receive some incentives, and it's good for them because they are caring differently than the others. Now the question is, do we agree to place children who do not have any problems, mentally speaking, or physically speaking, in schools which are maybe made for children who have these problems? Initially, the policy of the Romanian government was to include the children with disabilities joining the mainstream schools and to have quotas, saying in a class we might have 1 or 2 children, and the working, let's say, efforts of the teacher would be much more easy and helping by other children to helping others. So this was the concept, but I haven't seen children with disabilities being included in the mainstream schools, even though there was a clear policy. But I've seen so many children who do not have any problems from physical or mental problems being placed wrongly in schools who are dedicated for children with this problem. So I think it's not to harm anybody, but do we accept that children, just because they are ethnically Roma, we have to place them, as it is in Slovakia, over 60% of Roma are placed wrongly in schools for mentally disabled children.
Mona, did you have someone
Yeah.
else get into?
I think you're pointing to a very important problem. There's a general inclusion is not really in the vocabulary of education reform in Eastern Europe, and it really should be. And it's really an area where I think the Roma activists and disability rights activists could work together very well. These schools don't fail just Roma children. They fail children with disabilities as well, from what I've seen. And there is, if anything, there is a move towards actually increasing segregation rather than increasing inclusion that I've seen over the years. And there is an understanding that the existence in large numbers of these vast networks of special schools, which are changing names in each country. Now they're called like different things, like practical schools, called in the Czech Republic, or in Romania. I think they're called Centers for Inclusive Education, which is a good thing because they're supposed to give support to the mainstream schools for inclusion. However, they function as autonomous schools, and they have their own students, and basically it's the same deal with a different name. And I think that these schools need very careful looking at by both sides. I think they fail in different ways, different populations, but my understanding from what I've seen, my own experience, is that they do fail absolutely everybody there, and that they're in careful need of doing that.
If I could just add one more observation on this. Probably the most important desegregation case that's gone to the European Court on Human Rights, D.H. Lawrence and others versus the Czech Republic involved this practice of systematically channeling Roma children into so-called special schools. And I think it's important to understand, as I think Costell has suggested, that when you look at segregation of Roma, there are a variety of segregation mechanisms. And so it may be just flat out completely separate schools, segregated schools. It may be a single school with segregated classrooms, where all the Roma kids are, it may be putting them in the back row and sort of within the classroom. One version is channeling Roma kids into the special schools. So all of these things need to be addressed together. I think one of the things that came out as a byproduct of the DH case was that people also started to look at a little bit more critically at the special school system. And in among parents of other children, not Roma kids, but other kids whose kids were being segregated out into these schools, I think people were saying, is this the best way we can serve our children? And so I think you separately have this movement of questioning this kind of, is this the best way to achieve educational goals? In the Czech Republic, I think one of the most interesting things I learned about the special schools was that until fairly late in the 1990s, once you were channeled into a special school, you were prohibited by law from gaining entry into any licensed profession. Anything that required a license, mechanic, barber, whatever, by law. So it was no longer a question of your qualifications, and I think it really illustrated to me that this was not about the abilities of people, but really a way to keep people in certain places. So I think these two things are going on, and I think that they can be complementary, and I think that's what you're trying to suggest. But I think we also have to understand that even if this kind of segregation of children with disabilities ends, we still have to address other forms of segregation of Roma at the same time, because that's just one of the tools. So I think we're really probably on the same page. Catherine, did you have a question?
I did. Catherine Messina-Pyatt with the National Democratic Institute. Thank you so much, Erica, for screening the film. This was amazing, and thank you, Mona, for giving us the film, which was really tremendously moving and as well as educational. I thought I'd just briefly address the last comment. The National Democratic Institute not only works with Roma across Central and Eastern Europe, but we've also started working with civil society groups that represent people with disabilities, the LGBT community, and other sort of groups that are discriminated against in society. And we have encouraged different types of civil society organizations to try to cooperate on specific pieces of legislation where they might share a common interest. And what we find throughout all of Eastern Europe is that those kinds of coalitions across sectors can be really difficult to bring together, that I think it's just not something that has been traditionally pursued. For example, working with women's groups, you would think there might be a natural interest in trying to help represent Romani women who are often sort of doubly discriminated against, and yet there are so many layers of discrimination within different societies that often just doesn't happen. They don't really come together. But I think it's something that we're trying to help people understand is a more effective way of getting their issues addressed if you have more voices coming into coalition. I had a question, I guess, for maybe Mona, Costel, or anyone who's interested in taking it on. What struck me in the film was the almost passivity of the parents of the Roma children. And I think it's something that's not necessarily unique to Roma culture, but in a lot of East European societies, I think people are not necessarily used to going out and representing their own interests politically. But I wonder if you had a sense of any of the parents really feeling sort of outraged or thinking there's something, they should go talk to the mayor or they should talk to the school director. I know that the Education Mediators program is a really terrific way of getting parents and schools to understand each other better. But in terms of kind of organizing parents into what Erica referred to at the beginning, these parent-teacher associations where parents really, stand up for their kids, it just seems like that doesn't happen very much. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on how to try to motivate parents to understand how they can hold the schools and the local officials accountable.
I'm going to take sort of the part of the question that's specific to the film, and then that Costel maybe has sort of a larger question. The parents are very motivated to send their kids to a very good school. They would like that to happen very much, and they would like nothing better than to be empowered, to have their children to be empowered citizens. Now, they themselves, however, have never experienced empowerment of any kind, at least in this particular town. And for them, it is very difficult to even imagine actually taking action on their own and getting organized. And I think this is an area where it's extremely important to have, a lively civil society that can help along, to have role models, to have a sense of possibility. But in the absence of models, of precedents, of a history of empowerment, it is impossible for these people to actually fathom how they could begin to do that. And I think it's, the passivity is not something that they adopted consciously, but is something that has been built into their own history and into their own identity at this point. And it's something that we, all of us need help to represent ourselves better. And I think that people who have been disenfranchised for generations need even more help to be able to do that.
From my side, communities do exist in countries, in many countries, and the situation is different. When there are a number of similarities, also there are a number of differences. I have seen communities where parent motivation in supporting children education is very high. And I can name some localities that I have been visiting and parents that I met. And also places where parents are losing hopes. They don't see an added value in education because they haven't access to education too. They were lacking education. So they don't believe that, children should go to school maybe primary or not more than secondary. And then he or she has to find his own way in the life. This is what I hear sometimes from meeting with parents. Now, indeed, it's true that the Roma mobilization, the Roma, the way that Romas organize themselves, it's very low from many points of view, including political from the political point of view. And you are very aware about these realities, that actually Roma do not make a big difference for themselves when it comes to go for voting. They are indeed vulnerable by being easily sell or buy votes in the political campaigns, but they do not make a difference when it comes to mobilize politically around one organization. You know that there are a lot of fights between Roma politicians, and this is unfortunately the situation in reality. So I think parents, if we have a study recently was published on early childhood development, and the question of the study was if you were to send your children earlier than the primary or preschool to care center or to have day-to-day education, what would be the answer? And 98% of the parents in 4 countries that they were asked the question was answering that they would like to send their kids at a very early age to have access to education, even at the care center or at the physical education. So it's actually contradicting the opinion that Roma did not want to send them to school. In fact, they do want, but we saw that the condition of the schools today, I mean, even they send to segregated ones, or even they don't have any facilities, or the school facilities are far away from the community.
Just on something, thank you. I thought there was actually a moment in the movie when the community was empowered to go after something that was a priority for them. And that was, I think, the moment when they were talking with the mayor about the lack of water in their community. And I thought that was the moment, obviously, probably the fact that somebody was filming the scene greatly helped, but the fact that they were able to stand there and sort of ask for water that moment then because they needed it and because the kids are going to school and so on, and that immediately produced the results. They brought water there. So I'm probably nuancing what Mona has said, that there is no empowerment in the rural communities, and probably I'm thinking that there are cases when this can happen.
Christina, did you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to add something that this.
If you could use the microphone,
Okay.
that's my only request. Thanks.
Okay. So I want to add the comment that the question that was mentioned before. So I'm Roma myself, and I study education policy, and I asked myself the same thing when I saw the movie, and when I saw that father who was so powerless. And I also visited a community. It's a very similar community when I went to Romania a few weeks ago. And what I realized is that these people take their condition as a given, and even to be outraged, even to be furious, it's a form of empowerment. Like to think that it's not right not to have access to education, not to have access to your basic conditions. And that was so striking for me. That was so striking for me because one of my questions was do you hide your ethnicity? I was particularly interested in that because I hide my ethnicity for a long time. And they were like, no, they didn't even think about that. So I realized, wow, it takes a lot of guts to even hide your identity. So as Mona said, they cannot even imagine things can be different. They don't have a representation of a different way of doing things, and they're not aware of their rights at all. And a solution that I could see here is to expose them to a different form of reality, to show them that things could be differently. Like I study in the United States right now, and I give my own example. When I go in a restaurant now, it's very normal for me to be treated immediately. If I don't like the food, to be changed and everything. When I go back to Romania, things are not always the same. And before, it was very, very natural for me. I was like, okay, I don't like the food, whatever. But now I'm like, no, this is not right. So you have to have a different representation in order to fight for your rights. I was like even joking with some of my American friends. I was like, they're like, man, you really become aware of your rights, and so yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks. I think it's probably time for me to wrap it up. We've been here for a while, and I thank everyone for coming to see this great film and hearing our excellent panelists. I would leave you with one thought as we close. A couple of years ago, we had a public member to a human rights meeting who was a Romani American, Dr. Petra Gelbert, and in remarks that she made to the meeting there, she quoted from the former president of her alma mater, Derek Bach from Harvard. And one of his observations was, well, if you think education is expensive, you should try ignorance. And I think the message there is none of our countries, particularly in the economy that we have now, can afford to have significant numbers of our citizens undereducated and underengaged at anything less than their full potential. So I think this is an issue that all of us will continue to remain very engaged in. And again, I thank all of our panelists for being here and all of you for coming out today to see this great film. Thank you.